jump into the material network for the palm, and we're going to input our bark material that's been converted to the ACES color space. We'll copy and paste this, rename this to roughness, or rough, load in our roughness map. We'll also create an RS material, sorry, a redshift material, which is not to be mistaken for an RS material. So a redshift material is the shading group, and this node goes right at the end of the chain. And this would be similar to Maya's shading group as well. And we can name this something like palm underscore bark underscore out to say that that's at the end of the chain. Cool. Let's apply this material to the tree. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to disable this material. And as we said earlier, this material is an override. So what we've done, we've applied this material, we've dragged it on top, and now this material is being applied at this level. So you can see if you've got a material on this level, it's going to override what we've got here. And the reason why I'm assigning the material here this time around is because it's much faster if I need to drop this on top, or this on top, or this on top, and that will get updated every single time. And then right at the end, sort of when we're done shading, you can jump in, to this node here, and you can add your materials here. Okay, so with that said, we'll open up the Redshift render view, and again, just make sure you've got the palm bark out on. Open up the render view. Let's load that. Make sure you've got the OCIO ACES color management enabled. I've ticked test cam in here. I'll make the test cam, I think, 1000 by 1000 pixels. We'll lock the camera when we're in the test cam. I'm just going to zoom in to frame this up. Just like that. Cool. Open up the render view once again. We'll refresh. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So right now the bark looks a little bit too dark. So I'm going to jump in, and after the diffuse texture, I'm going to type RS color correct. We're just going to lift up those values just a little bit. So drop that in between. Let's gamma up just a touch. And we'll just increase the level scale here just to boost that texture up. Currently, it's looking very, very shiny. Let's plug in our roughness map. Refresh just to make sure that updates. And the levels on our roughness map are too dark, which is why we're getting a very shiny looking surface. So what I was saying earlier about dropping down a redshift material and this sort of being the shading group that goes right at the end, we can also use a redshift material to test out our textures and our noises and whatnot. So I'm going to plug this roughness map into the surface slot. We'll rename this to something like test. And then I'm just going to drop this onto the palm. So you can see our texture here. And it kind of looks like the whole thing's a bit squashed down. So let's change the repeat on Y. Let's drop that down a little bit. I think something like that. It's looking a little bit better. Let's lift up those black values. So 0 means that the surface is really shiny, and 1 means the surface is really rough. So we just need to lift those black levels up. And the way I usually do this is by using an RS change range. And if you've watched any of my other courses, you'll probably see me using this node over and over again. It's so useful. So where this says the new range minimum, this is what we want to be lifting up. So the levels are currently between 0 and 1. So let's lift those levels up to something more sensible. And I still want to get a little bit of contrast here as well. So think something around 0.1 there. That's fine. Let's see what that looks like. It's still not going to look right, but I just want to demonstrate it so we can see it. So it's still looking too shiny. We also need to make sure that we have the same value set on the diffuse texture as well, so 0.3, like so. We can also copy this parameter and we can paste a relative reference to here. I'll click on the scale once, as we did earlier, and whenever I update these numbers here, it will reflect in here. Alright, let's drop the test material back on top. And what we want to do now is start to introduce some noise in here to add some extra level of detail. So I'm going to drop down an RS noise. And what I usually do is I plug this into the test material, so we're just viewing the noise on its own. Go to the noise tab and I'll increase the complexity to something like 23. Drop down the amplitude gain, just to give a little bit more contrast. Just sort of playing around with this a little bit. Let's see what we get. I think something around that looks pretty good. Let's go to the coordinates and I'm just going to decrease the scale so we're making those details larger. I think that's looking pretty cool. Let's plug the roughness map back in. What we want to do now is drop down an RS multiply node to mix the noise with our roughness map. So we'll drop that there. Plug this in to input 2. And it doesn't really matter which way around these inputs go. 6 times 4 is the same as 4 times 6. So it makes no difference. Let's refresh the render. So now we've got our noise mixed in with our roughness map. It's looking like our noise is, or the black levels on our noise is too low. So we'll drop down an RS change range node again. And we're just going to lift those black levels up. So we're getting a nice blend there between our roughness map and our texture map. And I want to create a nice bit of contrast here. It's really important to get that contrast in. Let's add another RS change range at the end so we can lift those black levels up here. So on Bark, I'd expect the values to be probably around 0.35 to 1. Let's plug this in. And let's view. And that's not looking too bad. That looks all right. Let's drop down an RS normal map. And we're going to load in, I'll untick that what was on top. And we're going to load in our normal map here. We're going to plug this into the, we'll drop down the overall tab, we'll plug it into the bump input. Like that. I'm just going to increase this to something like 12, which is pretty crazy. Maybe drop it down to 6. Yeah, I think 6 is working quite well. Yeah, that's not looking too bad. And we never get this close to these assets. So I'm pretty happy with that bark material. So I'm going to hit save. All right, let's shade some fronds. Okay, we'll go into the palm. We're going to turn the flag to the fronds. And we're going to work on them. I'll drop down an RS material, and these will be called our palm fronds. We'll do exactly the same. Copy and paste this shading group, plug it in, call this fronds or palm fronds out, like so. We'll drop down an RS texture, plug that into the diffuse slot, rename this to diffuse. We'll load in our diffuse there. Copy and paste this a few times over. So this is our roughness. This will be our SSS color. Copy and paste. SSS amount. And RS normal map we'll need. RS normal map, not normalize. And we'll plug in the normal map there as well. If I can find it. There you go, normal. Let's drag this material on top. Take a snapshot there. So that's actually not looking too bad already. That's looking pretty decent. Let's plug in our roughness map. So reflection roughness. And I just want to view this texture. So I'm not sure what it looks like. So let's plug in the roughness into the surface here. And we'll apply this test material. And it looks like we've plugged in the wrong one. It's always a good idea to test out the materials. Okay, there you go. Let's reassign. I think that's looking pretty good. Reassign the test material. We're going to introduce some noise as we did earlier. Most likely copy these three nodes. Let's paste them. I'm using the Y, which brings up a snipping tool. Left click and just delete that line. Let's plug in our noise into the surface. I'm going to delete that RS change range. Hit re-render there. And actually I'm just going to get rid of that, just so I can see what's going on here. Let's plug that back in. Okay, so we've got some cool noise there over the palm. Yeah, that's actually looking alright. It's giving some nice detail there. Let's take an RS multiply node. Let's multiply these two values together. So we've got our fronds roughness map multiplied with the RS noise. RS change range again. Let's change the black levels on the noise, lift them up. Refresh the render. Be a little bit stubborn. There you go. It's looking pretty good. Then right at the end, RS change range. Just drop those. We'll lift those blacks up. So the most shiny I want this surface to be is probably maybe about 0.25, I think. Maybe 0.2. And the most rough I want it getting is probably about 0.8. So these fronds are actually quite shiny. Yeah, I'm kind of happy with that. Let's move the camera. Turn on bucket rendering. Yeah, I think that's looking all right. I think that looks okay. Looking very, very shiny here. So let's put the minimum up to 0.5. Sorry, not 0.5. I think 0.35. Yeah, that's looking better. Put the roughness up to 0.9. So we're now getting values between 0.35 and 0.9. And if you go on the RS material, it's actually saying 0. I'd expect to see a value, sort of the average value in there, but never mind. Like I said, I usually turn that to GGX as well. Okay, so that's looking pretty decent. I'm kind of happy with that. I think maybe we could actually turn this back down, 0.28. Yeah, it's looking okay. Let's plug in our normal map in here. Overall bump input. We can drop it down either way. Let's turn this up to something like 6. Keep that nice and strong. Pushed it too much. 2. I'm going to switch between 2 and then off so I can see the difference. Okay, so that's having a pretty strong effect, so maybe like 0.5. Take another snapshot. 0. Yeah, I think that's looking okay. It's looking in different areas there. Adds that extra little bit of detail. It's nice. Let's move on and we'll add in our SSS color and the amount. Okay, so we'll plug the SSS into the test material first. Let's reapply that shader. I'll reload the render. So we're viewing our SSS color. That's looking pretty nice. So I'm going to plug that into the translucency color. And I'm also going to plug in the SSS amount into the translucency weight. And if you had leaves that actually had thickness that were extruded, then I'd recommend using this in the SSS slot. But seeing as though we're using single-sided geometry, it makes sense to use this backlighting feature. So backlighting translucency. So on the shader here, it shows up as translucency, color, and weight. So it's sort of like a nice quick cheat. But if I was going to choose, I'd probably choose SSS. Let's apply the shading group. See what that looks like. And I'm going to view the SSS amount here. Apply that test material. And of course, make sure that we're loading in the SSS amount there. There you go. So it's actually looking really, really bright. So I'm looking to turn that down, RS change range. And this time around, we're going to turn down those whites. Like so. And why not multiply in some noise as well into this SSS amount to give even more detail. We'll plug this multiply into the test so we can see it. There you go, that's looking quite nice. Let's lift up the blacks just a little bit, make the effect a little bit more subtle, something around there. So we've instantly added more detail by using procedural noise. It's great. Let's plug this into the translucency weight, reapply the shading group. And let's see what that value is saying. It's not giving me any feedback there. Okay. I'm going to retest this out here. And I want more contrast. So if I drop down an RS color correct, okay, we can't use this node because it's asking for a float. Okay. RS change range once again. And I'm just going to mess around with the old min and max this time, just to get some contrast there. There you go, something like that. We'll boost up those levels a little bit. Although I probably would keep the maximum range at 1 and the minimum range at 0 so you don't get any weird artifacts. Let's reapply that. Just looking around, seeing what it looks like. Right now we don't have any lights behind the fronds, which kind of make it difficult to see. I'll take a snapshot there. And I'm just going to remove these, so snip them, just so we can see what this whole thing looks like. So you can see it's very subtle there. Just got a little bit of backlighting happening, and this effect is going to be so much stronger when there's a light behind it. Like I said, nice and subtle there. I might even drop that normal map down a little bit as well. So let's reapply those SSS maps. Re-render. Snapshot. I've turned the normals off. Let's go up to something like 0.5. Switch back to 0, 1. I'm just testing out different values, seeing what I get. And that is really helping, actually. It looks quite nice. 0.6 to 0. Switching between that. Yeah, I think 0.6 works quite well. Yeah, I think overall I'm happy with that. I mean, the SSS amount might need to be updated a little bit, but I think overall it looks pretty good. I'm going to hit save. So let's turn on both of these assets. I'll jump into the palm, and we're going to enable the palm bark material. Let's load in that palm bark out. Export relative path, copy and paste it, palm fronds, load in the, make sure we've got it selected, load in the palm fronds out. We'll view from the merge node, so now we've got the bark and the fronds there. And I just wanted to mention why I haven't used displacement. So if this was a hero palm tree, I'd probably be going into a lot more detail with this. I'd be adding in displacement as well because we'd be getting a lot closer. But seeing as though things are further away from the camera, it doesn't really make sense to add displacement because you're not going to be able to see it. It's also going to result in faster render times as well because there's less geometry to compute. Let's also remove the material from here. Not that it really matters because it's getting overridden by these materials here. Okay, let's hit render. There you go, that's not looking too bad. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. That's looking quite good. Let's check out the bark. And I'm not too worried about these jagged pieces because we're not going to be able to see them from a distance. So if we see it from here, that's looking nice. I think what we can do as well is we can actually add some dirt to these fronds and to the trunk. So let's do that. Let's go to the palm materials. I'm going to bypass the materials on here. Let's work on the bark first of all. Jump in, we'll apply the bark material. Just going to move the camera, make sure it's locked so you're moving it. Unlock it when you want to move out. Let's hit render. And the way we add dirt is by creating another RS material. And this will be called dirt. We'll change the color to something like a sort of muddy brown. Pause the render whilst we're doing this. That's likely to crash otherwise. I think a muddy brown, something around there. I think that's looking okay. PRDF, GGX, roughness all the way up to about 0.9. And what we're going to do is we're going to blend between the dirt and the palm bark. Let's drop down an RS material blender. We'll open up the base material and the layer 1. We'll plug the dirt into layer 1, which is sitting on top of the base. And we'll plug the palm bark into the base color. We'll plug the material blender into the shading group right at the end. Like so. Let's see what that looks like. And I think by default, if you don't have a map or a mask in this blend color 1, the only thing that's going to show up is the base material, which is a little bit weird. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this noise here. We're going to paste it. And we're going to use this noise as a mask to reveal the palm bark through the dirt. But I don't want to use the exact same noise as the one we've multiplied in with our roughness map. I just want to offset the noise a little bit. So I'm going to middle mouse button on, I think on this X value, so X, Y, and Z. So on here, middle mouse button, and I'm just going to make sure the render's stopped. I'm just going to give a random value. Let's plug the RS noise into the blend color. Let's re-render. See what that gives us. So you can see here that we've got the dirt on top, but I think it's too dark. I think it'd be nice to lift this dirt up just a little bit. Like that. Let's hit play. I'll turn this to red for now so we can see what's happening. Turn it to bright red so you can see it. And looks like we're going to need a lot more contrast there. If we take an RS change range node, as we did before, we're going to change the old range min and old range max. And it's worth noting that these new range min and new range max should always range between 0 and 1. These shouldn't go below 0, or it shouldn't go above 1. But the minimum I can change. So I'm just moving this about until I get a little bit of contrast there. and the red is where the dirt will be. That's a nice way to sort of visualize it. Let's put that back to a sort of muddy brown color. I'm going to pause the render whilst I do this because it's being quite slow. And even when I'm adding the mud, I'm looking to add mud that sort of stands out just a touch. So it needs to be a slightly different color to what we've put on there. I'll just be a little bit fussy playing around with these levels. Just so we get a little bit of extra detail there. It's looking kind of cool. That looks nice. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. Let's roll with that. That's looking alright. Okay, let's do exactly the same thing for the fronds. And this time around, it's going to stand out a lot more because the fronds are green. It's kind of difficult adding mud onto a brown surface. Stop the render. Let's do everything that we did here. We'll copy and paste this. And we'll paste it down here. Plug this into the palm fronds out. Lift it up. We'll plug the palm fronds into the base color. There. Just going to move this out to give us a little bit more space there. There you go. We'll change the dirt to like the browny color that we sort of intended for the bark there. Something around that. Let's turn off our main asset and we'll view from, we can view from here for the fronds. Let's apply our shading group. Set render. Lock the camera, move up, reposition it so we can see it. Restart the render. Make sure we're in the camera, sorry, and then lock it. Then move upwards. Restart the render. I'm going to copy these parameters, change it to red. Looks like we're not getting anything through there. Oh, there you go. Okay, so we are. So it kind of looks like maybe these values need to be boosted up. And I think for a mask, I think actually we can put this up. So this is probably the only case where I'd actually lift this new range max up is when I'm using noises as masks. But if I was using a noise and plugging it into a roughness map or a diffuse color slot, or sorry, the roughness slot or the diffuse color slot, or any of these for that matter, then I'd want the values to range between 0 and 1. But if it's a mask being plugged in to blend between two different shaders, then I think it's fine to push that up. Back on the dirt, I'm going to paste those values back in for the dirt just to see what we get there. There you go, and we're getting some dirt on top of there. Take a snapshot. We'll apply this RS material before it goes into the material blender so we can see the difference. There you go. Take a snapshot, and we're just going to switch between these two. There you go. So we're getting a nice bit of extra dirt and detail in there. It's looking cool. Let's reapply that material. And I think we're more or less good with the palm tree. I think we can move on to shading another asset. Let's turn those back on. You can come out and remove that. I'll do another file save as. And I'm regularly saving. It means if something goes wrong with a scene, or if I'm not happy with something that I've done, I've always got extra saves that I can go back to.